are classy Neuvillette's biggest pros and cons. That's what I'm here to tell you all today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Right, we have to get the obvious out of the way here. Neuvillette does an unfathomable amount of damage. Simply put, his DPS is without fathom. No other damage dealer is able to compete with the amount that he outputs, assuming regular gameplay. Mualani is pretty much the sole 5-star DPS who is able to compete with his numbers, otherwise my guy faces zero competition. Even on a craftable 4-star weapon, you can smash your head on the keyboard and he'll clear the enemies in front of you. There is legitimately no way to deal small numbers with him unless you deliberately go out of your way to do so. In my opinion, he is the best DPS in Genshin Impact. Barely anybody comes close. It doesn't matter what stage of the game you're at, he will be a good unit. The guy is a literal stick of dynamite, I swear. So if you're in need of a great damage dealer, it's not just that Neuvillette is a good choice or a great choice or even a sublime choice. No, he is the best choice. Straight up. Now, this won't be a pro for you if you're somebody who really enjoys intense, complicated gameplay, but if you're somebody who's a big fan of smashing your head on the keyboard in order to clear, then what do you know? This guy was made just for you. Neuvillette's gameplay is certainly the gameplay of all time. Because you summon a couple of balls, hold down his charge attack, then voila, you are pretty much good to go. Nice. There is literally nothing that could go wrong here. His gameplay is literally foolproof. Even if you consider yourself to be a truly awful player, you shouldn't worry too much, because even someone who plays with their eyes closed could clear with Neuvillette. Anybody is able to reach his highest damage ceiling, because his gameplay has incredibly little room for error. This can be a con for quite a few characters, such as you and Mia, because your inability to improve upon your clears means that if you simply aren't dealing enough damage, there's no real way to clutch the clear. However, in Neuvi's case, that literally doesn't matter because of how much damage he does. If you're not clearing with this guy, then it's a fault with the enemy's design, because if there were enemies that were too hard for even Neuvillette to clear, we would have all been cooked a long time ago. This also makes him a super accessible choice to players on all platforms. Phone users don't have to execute a whole lot of complicated button presses, with the same going for iPad users. You can hold your finger down and use the other hand to rotate the camera, which is pretty smooth to do on mobile. He's definitely one of the less clunky characters on there, which is nice. Console players should be fine too because, well, you just hold down one darn button. I'm 99% sure you'll be fine with that. Unless you're the type of person to play Mario Kart with auto-accelerate, then you're cooked. PC players, same story. You hold one button down while using your mouse to move. Sure, you'll need to skill and burst in order to obtain the blue balls in order to cut down his charge attack's charge time. But come on, that is the bare minimum that Hoyo was asking of you here. Neuvillette has 1 zillion team options too. Sure, you're probably gonna be using Celestia Killer Neuvi most of the time if you have access to it, or Vape Neuv if you're a hardcore speedrunner. However, that doesn't mean those are his only teams. I'm gonna list off every archetype that I can think of right now, but chances are I'm gonna end up missing a few. Okay, so Celestia Killer, Vape Speedrunner, Fischl, Taser Bloom, Hyper Bloom, Navia, Dual Carry, National. You wanna know what the funny thing is? These teams are all good. So if you're strapped for supports on your second half and are desperately trying to find alternatives to use with him, buddy, trust me, to say that you have options is an understatement. Sure, he has his best installed teams, but that isn't preventing you from using his other teams when necessary. It's funny how it feels like we're getting a Neuvi team buff like once every other patch. Think about it. There was recently Autodon, and before then Shilonen. Guys, it's so Celesti over. Whether Hoyo intended to or not, they made a busted DPS with a crazy roster of team options. If you're curious about a specific synergy, ask me down below. The answer to does it work will 99% of the time be yes. Surely Hoyoverse wouldn't make a DPS as good as this without making them at least somewhat balanced, right? So anyways, he's free to play accessible too. Yes, he will be as good as I said, everything included, even if you're using a cheap 4-star craftable like Prototype Amber on him. Nothing changes. He is still the best DPS in such a case. Or at the very least, the second best, being rivaled by only Mualani due to her 4-star weapon options being pretty decent for her. He's stupidly resource efficient to put together as well. You only really want to level up his normal attack as that's where his charge attack scalings lie. The other talents aren't anywhere near as important. Then you turn over to his main 4-piece, which galvanizes him with the most absurd amount of free crit rate. Not to mention that he's not even Farina reliant. Nope, he can trigger the set effects all by himself thanks to his inbuilt HP loss mechanics. He is a free-to-play's dream. If you consider your account to be very lacking in resources and you want a unit who won't eat most of them up, then Neuvillette is about as straightforward as it gets. It's honestly somewhat scary how good this unit is. We're literally on our 4th pro right now, which is that Neuvillette has quite the excellent Primogem-Based investment. So you remember Prototype Amber, yes? He kills the game and everything in it on that. Stick him on a signature weapon and you'll be seeing one of the most significant damage increases that a unit could ever have. Yes, base P Amber Neuvillette is already a Celestia killer. Hand him his tome and he will dethrone literally everyone in the Gotchaverse. Yep. The Xianzhou Luofu, Nueridu, Jinzhou, Amorpheus, Pericone, Bellapog, Mondstadt, Liyue, Itazuma, Sumeru, Notlan. They'll all be gone, because one Neuvillette charge attack when he's on a Sig will end them all. He will be promoted from Celestia Killer to Judgment Hunter. That's just his signature weapon, by the way. Yep. Might I interest you in his delicious C1? You see, the game knows that you're going to be using him together with our beloved Lady Farina. Even at C0, there's no doubt about it, as it's worth losing the single stack of Draconic Glories in exchange for the excellent synergy between these two. Kinda like how you ignore Lenny's Pyro-based A4 in favor of playing Lenny Farina Vape with him. However, if you want to get the best of both worlds, stick his C1 onto him. Yep, problem solved. Now you'll get every stack of Draconic Glories even when Farina's on the team with him. C1R1 is going to start to leak into our own universe, so be careful if it starts raining in your area, since I'm 99% sure if it's a C1R1 Neuvillette descending upon us. That's only the start of it all, with his Dolphin tier high investment potential. Might I interest you in Farina constellations? It's ridiculous how much of a breakthrough these are, with each and every one of them being a benefit to his team. Yes. There is actually a way to buff Neuvillette to the point where he will start tearing apart the fabric of reality itself. The fun doesn't stop there. Remember back when the only form of HP percent buffing was Yolande C4 and Hydro Resonance? Well, might I interest you in the DJC2? Allow me to remind you that Zillion already fits very nicely into Neuvillette's best installed teams, so this is a supernatural team synergy that's going on. The Primogem-based investment potential for this guy is scarily large. You don't even want to know what'll happen to our world if a highly invested Neuvillette finds his way in here. I think a very interesting pro regarding this guy is that he's arguably in the running for best character in Genshin Impact. I personally place Farina as number 1, and I've seen quite a few people place Zillion as number 1 as well. Typically speaking, the supports are the best units in this game. However, you could 100% make a case for Neuvillette being at the top of S tier. You've watched the video up until this point, so you're well aware of how good he is. His pros are roughly equal in number when compared to our gorgeous Lady Farina and Zillion. They're obviously different pros because these three do very different things from one another. But you get the idea. The fact that no other DPS is able to reach his consistency speaks volumes as to how broken he is. I sincerely doubt that any damage dealer is going to rival him in his niche anytime soon. Sure, there's Mualani, but she's more so only better if you're a speedrunner who can play her really difficult teams. If you're playing her more average, safer ones, then Neuvillette remains as being better on the whole. And sure, there's the possibility that Moika may end up being a power DPS. First off, we don't know that for sure as nothing's been officially confirmed. And second off, even if she did end up being stronger than him damage-wise, how do we know that she will share all of his pros, that she will also be really easy to play, that she will also crush everything and everyone on a craftable 4-star weapon? Well, probably, but I doubt that she'll be fully killing off Neuvillette. In fact, I just use the lame two halves argument here and say that the meta would be Nuvi on one half and Moika on the other, or Mualani being supported by the Pyro Archon on the other half. Or even better yet, watch her somehow be a buff to Vape Nuvi teams. A good way to put it is that Lenny is still an S tier unit, even though we have Arlecchino. So, even if Nuvi were to receive a proper rival that covers all bases, it's super unlikely that he'd fall out of the meta overnight. The ease of use aspect of him is always going to keep Nuvi as a very appealing pick to a lot of players too, since I'm sure there are some of you who play Genshin at 30 FPS on an overheating phone. Characters like this are an Archon send in such scenarios. He is consistently within the top 5 in any large-scale meta tier list, regardless of assumptions. That's a pretty big deal right there, because so many characters get worse or better depending on assumptions. Not this guy, he is good for everyone and everything within this game. You can easily make the case for him being the overall best character, which, do I even need to say why that's a huge pro? Right, I said this is a pros and cons video, so I need to struggle to find negatives. Ah yes, here's one. He uses high value supports. I'm just gonna say it flat out, who cares? He has like 7 other really good teams. I think you'll be fine if you can't use your Zillion buddy. Remember what I said earlier in regards to how it feels like the lad is getting new teammates nearly every other patch? You can always run 4-piece Cinder City Kachina in his teams if you don't have a DJ cat. Fischl's a pretty nice Farina replacement, which helps with his past Draconic Glory stacks. And there's pretty much a viable replacement for whoever you need in whatever scenario. It's a con by technicality, so I'm mentioning it, but do not let this be a deal breaker to you. Even if you're a new player with a super small roster, Neuvy will still cook. And finally, the guy has some mild C0 issues. Oh, the horror. Pretty much what I mentioned earlier about having to sacrifice a Draconic Glory stack in order to repeat an element in his teams. Yes, that's it. Unplayable garbage unit now, right? Yeah, man, I'm gonna be honest, his cons are nearly non-existent and are nitpicks at best. I get that no character is a must-pull, but come on. Guys, really hot take that is super controversial and hard to agree with. Neuvillette is a good unit. Shocker. Hoyo is obviously baiting us all before Moeka. The good news is that the 5.3 livestream will happen during his banner, so my advice is to hold off on pulling for him immediately and wait for the stream to see if there's any news. That way you can avoid regretting any impulse pulls. I'll be honest, if anyone builds pity on him and accidentally gets him, my man, that is a happy accident. Treasure Neuvillette at all costs. This fossil of a lizard shall guide you out of the abyss's darkness into the 36-star light with the most bare minimum investment ever. Probably one of the cheapest non-Dendro DPSs to build ever. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Neuvillette's biggest pros and pros. This has been Juice, signing out, and I think it's absolutely hilarious that they're running this dude next to Zhongli. Are we supposed to pull for him to judge Rex Lapis or something? The great battle of old men is near, I fear.